What's up builders, it's me Jimbotron back at you with another video. Today we have a build guide, and an extra special one too, because this one didn't just perform well in my games, it actually got featured on the official Overwatch page on all platforms. I'm going to be breaking down my Tank 76 build, the build that originally carried me up to my top 100 Season 1 placement. Let's get into it. Starting with a disclaimer, this build did carry me up to top 100 last season. However, I haven't played Soldier since then, so my gameplay might not fully do this justice. The core idea behind the build is that you take mainly biotic field powers, or powers that synergize with biotic field, to massively increase your tankiness on cooldown. This then allows you to invest heavily into raw damage output, meaning you get the best of both worlds, survivability and DPS. This build does require a bit of cooldown management, because without biotic field and helix rockets, you can get caught off guard, and you're basically just a standard soldier with only 1 or 2 survival items. However, when your cooldowns are up, you are genuinely one of the tankiest characters in the game, while still putting out a ridiculous amount of damage. Let's go through the powers. Starting with the first power, I take On Me. This makes it so that whenever you activate your biotic field, it moves with you and also gives you 20% increased max life. Now, I've seen a lot of people argue that Hunkered Down is better for round 1, because it lets you get into frontliners and double helix faster, making you tankier by round 4. But in my opinion, On Me is just better for round 1, and honestly, it's still just as strong by round 4. On Me doesn't just let you move around freely with your biotic field, meaning you get more money from cash as you'll heal more, but it also gives you that 20% max life increase, which is huge early on. If you follow the build principles I mentioned in my How to Build video, which should be popping up in the top right for you if you want to check it out and come back, you'll know that the strongest round 1 setups usually give you around 60 extra max HP. When you combine that with On Me, you can easily hit around 370 health in round 1 while your cooldown is active. At that point, you're basically the tankiest DPS in the game in round 1 apart from Mei. Your next power is a bit of a toss-up. You can either go for Frontliners and start the build off early, or pick up Hunkered Down. Now, Frontliners is the core power of the build. It makes it so that whenever you use Biotic Field, 25% of your max life is granted as overhealth. Early on, this isn't anything crazy, but it will definitely help in one-on-one fights, giving you around 70 to 100 burst health in round 2 just from pressing Biotic Field. Where it really starts to shine is around round 4, when you've built more max life and it has much better scaling, and more activations from the next power, so if you feel tanky enough, definitely hold out on this one till round 4. Now speaking of that, Hunkered Down is your other option here. Just to be clear, you can take either Hunkered Down or Frontliners in round 2. Hunkered Down will statistically give you more cash, but I've taken Frontliners round 2 plenty of times and had no issues. What Hunkered Down does is allow your helix rockets to activate Biotic Field, which effectively gives you another potential Frontliners proc every 6 seconds. That also means way more uptime on your max life bonuses from On Me as well. Personally, I do like to Hunker Down second. However, that will make you quite vulnerable to being mercy ruled quite a lot of the time, so this is preference. Then last, but definitely not least, we take Double Helix. This is an insanely strong power for the build because it lets you proc Hunkered Down twice. Since Hunkered Down triggers both On Me and Frontliners, taking Double Helix here basically doubles the value of everything you already have. What this means in practice is that every 6 seconds, you can generate up to 50% of your max life as overhealth. That is genuinely ridiculous in fights. You become incredibly hard to kill, and in 1v1 situations, this is one of the only DPS builds in the game that can actually go toe-to-toe with a tank and still have a very strong chance of winning because of it. Now, as for items, this part is actually really simple on this build, and I think it's why you're going to be seeing it a lot on the ranked ladder. Basically, the only core item you really want is Vanadium Injection, and honestly, you don't even need it. It's just by far the best option if you can afford it. What Vanadium Injection does is make it so that when you get your ultimate, you technically can use it, but you really shouldn't because you'd just be wasting the value. In return, you get 50 additional health and 10% of every major stat. That means 10% weapon power, attack speed, movement speed, and cooldown reduction, which are all insane for this build. Movement speed helps your sprint scale up, attack speed and weapon power massively boost your damage, and cooldown reduction lets you cycle helix rockets and biotic field faster. which directly increases your survivability. On top of that, it also gives a base 50 shields, so overall you're gaining around 100 extra max life plus all of those stats. Considering how much mitigation there is in Stadium, Soldier's ultimate honestly just feels like a big look at me button anyway, so this trade-off is completely worth it. For another survival item, I almost always take Rüstung von Wilhelm. This is, in my opinion, the best max life scaling item in the game. It gives you 50 health and then increases your total health by 10%, which means every other survival item you buy becomes more valuable as well. On top of that, you also get damage reduction when you're low, which is huge in clutch situations. The main reason this is so strong in this build is because both on me and frontliners scale directly off your max health. So the more HP you stack, the more value you're getting from your powers. And then for the rest of your items, the only other must pick for me is Weapon Jammer. This item works in a slightly weird way, but effectively you get 25 armor, 10% weapon power, and after dealing damage, you gain 10% attack speed. So stat-wise, it's kind of like a toned-down version of Vanadium Injection. But the real value comes from the passive, which removes 10% of your opponent's bonus attack speed. The way this works is that if your opponent goes above 100% attack speed, this just cuts 10% off the top, which can be huge. Considering 10% attack speed is worth roughly 4k, this item can generate a lot of value in the right matchups. As for your final slots, you can pretty much flex them depending on the situation. You don't really need any more survivability outside of Vanadium and Rüstung von Wilhelm unless you feel like you need it. At that point, it just comes down to knowing which items are strong and what fits the game. I was thinking about making a full video breaking down all of the Stadium items and what they're good for, so if that's something you'd want to see, let me know in the comments. But as a general rule to keep in mind, especially on faster firing characters, the more armor your opponent has, the weaker attack speed becomes. Armor reduces damage by up to 50% on hits up to 7 damage, which basically means low damage projectiles get hit the hardest. So if you're firing a lot of small damage shots, armor is going to massively reduce your output. On the other hand, fewer, higher damage shots are affected much less, which makes weapon power more effective into armor. In general, weapon power is better than attack speed into armor, but attack speed is actually better when it comes to building ultimate charge. That said, in a perfect scenario, with no armor and full accuracy, the highest DPS always comes from a balance of both. So you don't want to fully commit to one or the other. You want to find that sweet spot between attack speed and weapon power. And now, finally, let's scale the build. The first metric I always look at is impact. This is how much a build can actually make its mark on a game. The higher the impact, the more carry potential it has. For this build, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Honestly, it doesn't really have any bad matchups. It has high damage output, so even tanky heroes struggle into it. And it's also extremely survivable, so there aren't many forms of burst damage that can take you out. The only reason it's not a 10 is because there are a few DPS heroes in the current meta that are just slightly more impactful, and I do rate these relative to the meta as a whole. Next up is early game. This is how well the build performs in rounds 1 and 2. It might seem like a weird metric, but these are some of the most important rounds in the game. They decide whether you snowball or get mercy ruled, and they heavily affect your late game economy. For this, I'm giving Soldier an 8 out of 10. Strong healing powers in rounds 1 and 2 are always valuable, as they give you both survivability and consistent cash generation early on. Then we have scaling. This is how well the build performs going into the late game, and again I'm giving this a 9. This build scales really well. By the later rounds, 4 of your 6 items can be fully damage focused, and even one of your survival items contributes to damage indirectly. Your damage scales hard, and your survivability scales alongside it through your powers, which makes the build feel very complete. And finally, fun. Now, good builds will always score higher here by default because winning is fun, but this one stands out. Soldier 76 on this build was my personal pick to reach top 500 for a reason. It's really satisfying to track targets, and even more satisfying to be able to overextend and not get punished because of how much sustain you have. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Overall, this build gets an 8.5, and I think that's very well deserved. That's it for today, builders. Hope you enjoyed, and it was honestly really cool seeing this build get posted by the official Overwatch account. Till next time, builders.